Now, last week marked 25 years since a gang of racist thugs murdered Stephen Lawrence. Britain has come a long way since, with much of the travelling being done by the police. Truth be told, they did have a lot of distance to make up. Some, not all, practices and attitudes seem to belong to the American Deep South rather than a nation supposedly famed for its sense of tolerance. But the police have changed, and that is why the comments made by the usually learned Archbishop of York, Dr. John Sentamu, are unhelpful and deeply unfair. He said the report after Lawrence's murder that said the police were institutionally racist needed to be, and I quote, revisited by every police service so that they learn the lessons. That's insulting to everyone brave enough to currently serve as a police officer. He's saying racism is normalised and established in today's police. Yes, they have issues, like other large organisations, but they have striven to put right vile wrongs. And the Archbishop is utterly misguided to reignite this unholy row.
Nick, I totally see where you're coming from to a point. I do think things have improved in the 25 years since the Macpherson report. But I think if you ask particularly any man of colour, what it feels like to be somebody that is constantly stopped, where the assumption is that you are guilty. And if you look at the statistics, black people or people of colour, being me, are 8 times more likely to be stopped than white people and less likely to be carrying drugs, actually. So I think I get where you're coming from, but in terms of the lived experience of the people this affects, I would say the majority of them would agree with the Archbishop of York.
Because to be institutionally racist, as I'm sure you're... And it's really important it is to say effectively that it is absolutely normalised with the institution. And the blokes and women who are getting up, who got up this morning and who'll go and get up tomorrow morning, accept that racism is in... That is what it means, is in the fabric of their organisation. Now, have they still got issues?
There are practices that are the norm within that institution that yield racist results. That's what it's saying. So your intention might not be...
What practices?
Stop... black people being 8 times more likely to be stopped.
But what's a
That's
racist...
all I need to say.
I'll bring you in. What is a racist result, June?
Black people being 8 times... People of colour being 8 times
But lastly,
more
before I throw it open, if you talk about a city like London...
When they are less likely to have drugs or firearms or whatever it is they're being...
Well, that's where I would have to challenge you, because if you look at the possession of firearms and knives... Drugs is an interesting one, because there is an enormous problem with white males with drugs, and county lines and white kids carry... But if you look at possession of knives and guns, you will accept...
London...
Yeah, but you will accept that that is a problem within the black community.
No, I would accept that that is a problem within a specific group that are part of the black community in London.
But when
That's
you look at the pictures
nationwide.
of those tragic victims, more than 80% of the 60+ who've been killed in London are non-whites.
I'm accepting that.
OK, fine, OK. Carol.
Let's just have a look at what the Archbishop actually said.
If you stereotype people, you end up disadvantaging them, and I think the insidious thing about it is that because people may be white, you assume they're guiltless, and when they're black, you assume they must be guilty. So how you get this out of an organisation requires clear vigilance.
See, what interests me about that is I don't think he did say that they were institutionally racist.
He said it needed to be reviewed.
Yes, but I don't think he said that they were institutionally racist. My own experience, as I tend to agree with you, that I think there's been a massive change.
For sure.
I remember when I was when I was running the BBC, I was invited by John Stevens, who was then running the Met, to go and talk. I'd invited him to talk to our senior management. He invited me to go and talk to theirs. What was interesting to me was not what I was saying, but it was what he was saying. He basically said to them, I won't put up with this. Talking about race, I won't put up with this. And I think there's been a massive change at the top.
I agree.
Whether that's changed, how much that's changed down below, I don't know.
A lot of distance has been travelled. There are still issues. I'm not pretending they're not. Carol Malone.
I think Macpherson produced some very positive change. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves 20 years on is... 25 years on, sorry, is would the police today deal differently with the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And I think they absolutely would deal differently. So massive changes has been made. What I think was that every few years, some organisation damns the police again. Every 5, 10 years. The Runnymede Trust did it 10 years ago. And the Black Police Officers Association did it recently too, as well as the Archbishop.
From him in a minute.
Yeah. But you know, what you do here is it's a mass defamation of every police force in this country. And it's demoralising to all our policemen who I think have changed hugely to have to work under this banner now of being racist. You know, I don't believe they are racist. You know, many people many years ago, when the inquiry was happening, didn't believe the police were institutionally racist then. There were voices at the time that were saying the police weren't institutionally racist, but institutionally incompetent in the way they handled the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And the only conclusion they could come to at the end of it, was that because he was black, it had to be racist. And that did defame every police force in this country.
We'll bring Michelle in a second. Let's just hear, you want to bring in, come in after this, and one of the relevant quotes from the association.
This is from Tola Munro, president of the National Black Police Association. And Tola says, I think there has been some progress, and I'm grateful for the progress and the increasing number of BME officers. But if I was marking policing, I would give us a C at the moment. We within the NBPA would argue that we would consider at least some forces are institutional.
Can I just come back...
In a sentence, because I want to get Michelle
I just want to say, the police officers, Black Police Officers Association is saying that because there aren't the same equivalent percentage numbers in the force of BME as there are in the population, that means it's racist. But, you know, we've got to look at the fact that that's one of the things they said. But we've got to accept that a lot of black people don't want to join the police force. There's recruiting drives in every police force, and the numbers aren't there. They don't want to join. That's what we should be looking at.
Michelle.
Well, I agree with Carol to a degree in terms of I think it must be quite demoralising if you're just a good person that's joined the police force to do good, to be told, you know, institutional racism still exists in what you're doing. That must really demoralise you, and I don't actually think that that's the case anyway. And I think that sometimes I wonder if we're so afraid of being seen as institutional racists. When I think of things like Rochdale, Telford and all the rest of it, I wonder sometimes if we've gone too far the opposite direction.
These are the child grooming scandals, just to remind the viewers what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So that makes me wonder if we've gone too far the opposite direction. However, I do have a 15-year-old mixed-race godson, and when I talk to him, he tells me that he does still worry about things like stop and search, etc., because of his skin colour. So obviously things are not perfect, and there is still some work to be done.
Greg, you made a really good point there. That he's saying that people are ethnic minorities were treated with kid gloves. One of the accusations after McPherson was that police officers on the ground were so paralysed by fear of going near ethnic minority people that they turned a blind eye to crime.
Figures don't suggest that at all.
This was Rochdale and Rotherham, June. They turned a blind eye.
Let's move it away from policing to another area just briefly. When you were running the BBC, you got a lot of controversy because you were determined to try and change that. How successful were you?
We made some progress. Whether it's still there, I don't know. I haven't seen this.
Why was it important to do it?
Why was it important to do it? Because I think institutions need to reflect the society they're serving, is the truth. And if you looked at... The figures were actually much worse than people understand, because most of the BBC centres are in big cities, where so you take the national figures, but they're not relevant. It's the relevant of the population in that city.
So what did you do? How did you try and fix it?
He did a lot.
I did a lot, but I basically set up a kangaroo court, I'll be honest, and we just, every 3 months we would have heads of departments in and say, your figures aren't changing, why not? And over time they changed.
How long were they given? How long was a department head given to put it right?
Oh, yeah.
But what happens if you're in the police force?
I mean, we were lucky, though. I mean, you remember, this is a time of expansion. It's much harder when an organisation is cutting back.
Do you think black people don't want to join? Let's just explore a point. Do you think black kids, men and women, want to join the police?
I don't think you can generalise like that. I think at the end of the day, it's like anything. You've got to look at any profession that has a low percentage of whatever group, and you've got to look at how do you source talent from that community? What are you doing to reach that community? So I don't think it's a...
But let me just say, there's an inspector in West York's police called Tanya Wilkins, and she said that when she was going to join, her family begged her not to, but her community isolated her. They called her a sellout and a coconut because she was a black person joining the force. And so I do not think that's still around. I think it is because there are recruiting drives.
had the privilege to do the last but one. I took the passing out parade of Met Police candidates at Hendon, the last but one on now Lord Hogan Howe's report, so he's the preceding commissioner, and you walk down the ranks. You might have done it, Greg. It's a tremendous honour to do it. It was to see London. There was every single colour. They couldn't have worked harder at non-white representation, truly.
And can I just add to that? This isn't a problem in America. America has no problem recruiting police officers from black and ethnic communities. So we just need to look at what is it that they're doing that works that maybe we're not doing here.